humanity. We were promised flying cars, lunar colonies, a graceful technological ascension. Instead, I'm being asked quite earnestly to admire a motorized geometry error conceived during a billionaire's extended GoldenEye binge. A fever dream where low polygon wasn't a technical limitation, but a personality trait. Behold, the Tesla Cybertruck, not so much a vehicle as a structural sigh. This is what happens when unmitigated brutalism and unchecked ego collaborate to decide that subtlety is a word for the weak. The result? A stainless steel refrigerator having a very public identity crisis. It doesn't look designed, it looks declared. It's an object that screams, "Everyone look at me," while simultaneously begging, "Please don't touch me, I stain." I'm surrounded by Philistines who think a wedge of unfinished metal is disruptive. It isn't. It is a rolling Lego set that clearly lost its instruction manual. It is an incomplete rendering. It's loud, it's tedious, and it is, frankly, offensive to anyone cursed with functioning corneas. So we start at the front, that stainless steel stare that dares to meet your eyes and somehow expects a compliment. I shall not grant it. To do so would be a betrayal of every aesthetic principle held dear since the Renaissance. From dead on, it's a truck if trucks were terrifyingly honest about their own incompetence. It is stubby, snub-nosed. It possesses the silhouette of a vehicle that hit a concrete wall at 60 miles per hour and simply decided to stay that way. It looks as though someone pressed future in a 3D modeling program, forgot to hit render, and just shrugged. I have seen comparisons to everything from a PS1 polygon to a rolling prison toilet knocked over backwards, or perhaps GTA Vice City puked up a pickup truck. Honestly, I've seen more sophisticated geometry in a box of bran flakes. And then there's the gigawiper, that singular, colossal mechanical gallows leaning against the windshield like a forgotten construction crane. It doesn't just clean the glass, it stands as a permanent vertical monument to the fact that aerodynamics was a chapter the engineers simply skipped. It is a visual blemish on a car that is already a rolling mistake. The actual headlights hide under that massive slab of metal like embarrassed children at a family reunion muttering, "I didn't sign up for this." They are tucked away in a dark slit, squinting in shame, while that blinding LED unibrow, which I call the monobrow of mediocrity, interrogates everyone in its path. Even the safety experts at the IIHS have weighed in, giving these lights a poor rating because they produce so much excessive glare. They practically blind oncoming traffic. It manages the rare feat of being both useless to the driver and offensive to everyone else. Well, let's talk about the frunk, or as I prefer to call it, the cyber guillotine. We've all seen Carrot Gate. This is a motorized hood that doesn't just close, it hunts. Tesla's brilliant solution to it, crushing fingers, was a learning algorithm that actually increases the closing force if it meets resistance. The machine is literally learning how to better sever your appendages. It assumes that if the hood hasn't closed yet, it's because it hasn't tried hard enough to crush whatever is in its way. It's not smart technology, it's a localized robot uprising. And if you're hoping the cameras will help you navigate this blind 3-ton rhinoceros, good luck. In a slight drizzle, the camera-only vision becomes about as reliable as a cataract. It has no radar, no LiDAR, just a series of lenses that off-gas, oily film from the interior plastics until the truck is essentially driving itself through a permanent London fog. The nose, if we are to be generous enough to call this flat cliff a nose, is a pedestrian slicer. It is 7,000 pounds of unyielding steel with the safety considerations of a medieval poleaxe. It doesn't have a crumple zone, it has a delete zone for anything smaller than a mid-sized SUV. The front end of the Cybertruck doesn't say, "Look at me, I'm innovative." It says, "I exist, you may despair now." If the front was a tragedy, the side profile is a full-blown Shakespearean collapse. Behold the triangle, the strongest shape in nature, and apparently the only one the design team could remember how to draw. It's as if a pyramid and a filing cabinet had a disagreement and decided to stop speaking to each other mid-merger. It makes the Nissan Cube look like a high art masterpiece and the DeLorean look like a curvy Italian sports car. The apex, that sharp, unnecessarily aggressive point where the roof meets, looks less like an automotive roofline and more like a sundial for the end of civilization. It's the kind of geometry that makes your brain itch. It's not aerodynamic, it's just a wedge of unpainted industrial waste that looks like it was rendered by a graphics card currently screaming in agony. Then there's the manufacturing. We were promised sub-10 micron precision to the cultured ear. That sounds like Swiss watchmaking. In reality, it manifests as panel gaps so vast and inconsistent that you can likely park a smaller, more attractive car inside them. I've seen more consistent spacing in a toddler's first attempts at a jigsaw puzzle. One door looks like it was installed by an engineer, and the other looks like it was slapped on by a distracted intern using a close enough philosophy. Some owners have even been told to fix these gaps with duct tape to stop the wind from screaming at them. Nothing says Luxury future truck, quite like structural Elmer's Blue Energy. And let's talk about that stainless steel. It was marketed as hard freaking stainless, but it functions primarily as a high-definition forensic database for oily fingerprints. If a single human being within a 3-mile radius even thinks about touching this truck, it leaves a smudge that looks like a crime scene. It's a $100,000 refrigerator that you aren't even allowed to take through a standard car wash without a car wash mode, which is essentially the truck begging for mercy, so its computer doesn't commit digital suicide. And don't get me started on the totally not rust orange spots. They call it surface contamination, or rail dust. I call it the truck's way of admitting it's slowly being reclaimed by the earth. It turns out SpaceX-grade steel is particularly reactive to well-existing outdoors. We must also address the armored glass windows, the ones that famously lost the fight with a metal ball during the reveal. By 2026, the legend has only grown more pathetic. Owners are reporting windshields that shatter while being cleaned by hand from the inside. It's shatter-resistant only in the sense that it resists staying in one piece. And because of the truck's revolutionary wedge shape, those windows create a pillar so thick they have their own zip codes. You don't drive this truck as much as you peer through a mail slot, hoping there isn't a pedestrian or a small child hiding in the massive blind spot created by the engineer's refusal to use a curve. Finally, the doors. There are no handles, just a tacky button that often fails in the cold, leaving you locked out of your own polygon. It's a vehicle designed by people who hate the outdoors but want to look like they're ready for Mars. The side of the Cybertruck doesn't look like a finished product. It looks like a shipping container with a midlife crisis. It's a polygon that's lost its way. And finally, we arrive at the rear, the part of the truck that looks like a flat-screen TV from 2005 that's fallen off a wall and been left to rot in a scrapyard. I call it the wall of topographical boredom. It is a monolithic slab of featureless metal that possesses all the aesthetic charm of a closed garage door in a dystopian housing project. Standing behind it feels like staring into a stainless steel void that is currently judging your life choices. Internet commenters have rightfully observed that it looks like someone knocked over a prison toilet backwards. It is a visual vacuum so profound it makes a blank spreadsheet look like a Van Gogh. Then there's the so-called vault, a tonneau cover marketed as a fortress for your belongings, but which functions in reality as a sophisticated colander. Despite the bulletproof posturing, this motorized cover has a charming habit of letting in totally non-elite water. Owners are finding that within spec is Tesla speak for your luggage is now a swamp, but at least it happened in the future. Even worse, some trucks ship missing slats entirely, leaving gaps so large you could practically mail a letter into the bed of the truck. It's a $100,000 vehicle that requires a general remedy and a DIY application of foam and electrical tape just to stay dry. It's not a vault, it's a leaky shed on wheels. Let us discuss the visibility or the total lack thereof, because the roofline tapers into a point designed specifically to irritate my soul. And because the tonneau cover exists, the rearview mirror is, well, it's a screen. You see, a glass window was far too 20th century for this revolution. Instead, you're forced to rely on a camera that, given the truck's legendary affinity for oily fingerprints and road grime, is usually about as clear as a cataract. In the rain, the camera becomes entirely useless within 5 minutes as there's no spray nozzle to clean it. You aren't driving, you're navigating a blind 3-ton rhinoceros by hope and prayer. And don't forget the recall parade. The NHTSA had to step in because the rearview camera was so slow to turn on, it was literally illegal. Drivers were staring at a blank screen for 8 seconds while backing up. In the time it takes for the high-tech camera to boot up, you could have already backed over a mailbox, a hedge, and a small sedan. Finally, we have the tailgate. It doesn't have a traditional bumper. It just has more sharp, beveled edges designed to remind you that safety is for people who don't live on the edge. This is a tailgate that doesn't just close, it threatens. Owners are reporting actual lacerations just from the simple act of touching the corners. Between the pedestrian slicer at the front and this finger-pinching guillotine at the back, it's as if the truck is actively trying to prune the human population. The closing mechanism is even programmed to increase its force if it meets resistance, meaning it doesn't think, oh, that's a finger. It thinks, I need to crush this obstacle to fulfill my destiny. The rear of the Cybertruck is a flat, featureless insult. It doesn't say I'm a truck. It says I'm a shipping container with a midlife crisis, and I might just take a finger if you look at me wrong. So, as we gaze upon the wreckage of this social experiment here in 2026, we must face a sobering reality. The Cybertruck is a beta test on wheels that humanity collectively failed. It has transitioned from a futuristic icon to a sales Armageddon. It turns out most people don't want to pay 6 figures for a vehicle that looks like a 5-year-old's drawing brought to life by someone who forgot the rest of the car. It is a monument to unearned confidence. Congratulations, Tesla, on creating the ugliest vehicle to ever grace the asphalt. It makes the Fiat Multipla look like a Botticelli. I thought I was prepared. I had seen the digital renders, I had processed the grainy social media leaks, I believed my disdain had reached its ceiling, but seeing this thing in the flesh, it's a revelation of a completely different sort. Photos are actually a mercy. They fail to capture the true visceral awkwardness of its proportions, the way it sits on the road, like a glitching texture in a reality that clearly wants to delete it. In person, it isn't just ugly. It is an active, three-dimensional assault on the concept of good taste. It's time to bury this polygonal catastrophe deep enough that future civilizations never find it. I can only hope that if archaeologists do dig it up, they assume it was a primitive torture device or a very expensive joke, rather than the best humanity could offer in the year 2026.